Good morning. Here is the news. Yesterday, the High Court in London approved plans to build an assembly hall of Jehovah's Witnesses at Almondsbury near Bristol. Our reporter has the details.
Around the world, 5 million Jehovah's Witnesses are busily engaged in one very public activity.
Hello, hello. It's lovely to find you home this afternoon. My sister and I, we're encouraging people in this neighbourhood to take a positive view of the future. Is that the way you feel?
As a consequence, they're growing rapidly, forming a huge global family united by spiritual values. This extraordinary growth has prompted the execution of an international building program to meet the pressing need for meeting places or kingdom halls. This building program has generated entirely new techniques of construction. One of these is the quickly built system. By this means, a kingdom hall can be constructed in just a few days using skilled volunteers. Internationally, hundreds of these halls have been built by the local congregations. Additionally, larger assembly halls have been built to accommodate regional assemblies of Jehovah's Witnesses. In England and Wales, nearly every urban congregation has access to an assembly hall like this one in Surrey, capable of holding up to 1,200 visitors. Nearly everyone, that is, except in the West Country and South Wales. So, in 1985, at a meeting attended by all the local congregation elders, a resolution was passed to search for a suitable site. In the event, it took over 9 years for the Bristol project to come to reality. But looking back, those who've been involved in the project have been convinced of the truth of the words at Zechariah 4 verse 6. Not by military force, nor by power, but by my Spirit, Jehovah of Armies has said. Although there were many obstacles to overcome, there were also many instances where it seemed that Jehovah's hand was guiding events. For example, for the convenience of all the witnesses who would attend the assembly hall, it was decided to look for a site as close as possible to the M4-M5 intersection at Bristol.
One of the first sites we looked at was an office block on the Cadbury site at Keynsham. It was a very attractive building, but the problem was the situation. Very difficult to get to from most of the project area. Another problem was cost. It was expensive. When we realised the difficulties with Keynsham, we began to look at sites to build our own hall, and eventually we found a piece of land at Lawrence Weston. It seemed a very good site, and we really tried hard to get it. But eventually Bristol City Council, who owned the land, decided that they wanted it kept as public recreation land. So, after 2 years of negotiations, we had to start again.
The Lawrence Weston site later became the subject of a compulsory purchase order to become part of the link road for the new Second Severn crossing. If the assembly hall had been built there, it would have been seriously affected.
At that time, it was a big disappointment. But we then set about combing the project area, and we listed some 4 or 5 sites that appeared to have a good potential. These 4 or 5 sites were then subjected to an exhaustive study to establish which one was the best suited for our needs. We looked at the situation, the price of course, how easy it was to develop, and one of these sites was Hortham Lane, which had been taken off the market, but the owner, when asked, agreed to sell. It came out of the blue, so to speak. It was just as though Jehovah had a hand in matters. It was just what we needed.
When this site at Hortham Lane became available to us, It seemed to be an answer to our prayers, because from the site we can see the M5 and just about hear the traffic on the M4. In fact, by road we're just over a mile from the M4-M5 interchange, just as the Society had requested in that original brief back in 1985. The moment we saw it, we could see that it was beautifully conducive to worship. It wasn't an industrial estate, it wasn't even in the city. It's right in the middle of the countryside, the right environment for what we're trying to achieve.
Unfortunately, this 22 acres of land occupies a very prominent position in the Bristol Green Belt, and obtaining planning permission turned out to be exceptionally difficult. 4 years of legal battles followed. The Department of the Environment finally granted outline planning permission in November 1991, but the council then appealed to the High Court. One crucial argument hinged on whether the Assembly Hall qualified as an institution in extensive grounds. A decision of detail made by the planning team early on turned out to be crucial.
It's interesting how things turn out. We have a 22-acre site and we could have put the building anywhere, perhaps in the top corner or the bottom corner. But the brothers working on the planning application discussed the various reasons for the different positions, and the final decision was to draw it in the centre of the site. On the 24th July 1992, when the High Court judge gave us his decision, he specifically said that in his view, because we wanted to put the hall in the centre, it was obviously an institution standing in extensive grounds. If we had put the building off to one side or the other, we might well have lost in the High Court. So there again, perhaps the project was directed to the right decision.
Full planning permission was finally granted on the basis of a quite revolutionary idea. The hall would be set into the side of the hill. By scooping out part of the hill and spreading the excavated spoil in a horseshoe to create a landscape hollow around the outside, the building would be completely hidden from the surrounding area. Events now began to occur with astonishing regularity that clearly were not coincidence. Take, for example, the urgent need for site accommodation.
Brothers travelling up from West Wales to meetings passed by and saw these school classrooms empty on this site and the site running down. After a few weeks' delay, we were found that if we could take them off the site, we could have them. There were, I think, about 14 low loader loads of building to come down, and of course there were 2 cranes, one each end. I was here the day they unloaded the first one, and one always expects adjustments to be made on these sort of things, but it was a tribute to our brothers in the way that they followed the dimensions, because the first lorry pulled out alongside, and from the time that he'd unbuttoned everything and we got the sling around it until we took the sling off the building as being in position was 15 minutes. If we were to have to pay to rent this office accommodation, and we've got 18,000 square feet of office accommodation and building accommodation here, we had to pay that in rent at half the commercial rate, we would be talking like somewhere in the region of about £16,000 to £17,000 rent a year. Once again, we take this as a sign that we're doing things the right way. Jehovah's blessing us.
Because of the critical nature of the groundworks, the contract was awarded to Tarmac Construction, a company with an international reputation, and they hired a specialist groundwork subcontractor called Blackwells, who brought in huge Komatsu scrapers to excavate the site. Within a matter of weeks, the side of what was once a green hill had become a crater. But by now, autumn had arrived, and with it came the rain. For 2 weeks, it was impossible to move the machinery, and frustrations mounted. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the rain stopped and work restarted. For the next fortnight, Blackwell's pushed their machines and drivers to the limit to catch up lost time. By the beginning of November, they reached the level that would eventually form the car park. The auditorium was to sit in a basement below this, carved out of the solid rock. A powerful Komatsu 155 ripper was brought in to tear up the rock, but this was hard limestone, and initial hopes that the rock could be removed with machines soon gave way to the realization there was only one really effective way: blasting. By carefully placing the charges, the basement was quite literally carved out of the rock. It's a tribute to the skill of the operators that when they'd finished, the crater they left behind was exactly the right size and shape to build the auditorium in. With the excavation rapidly reaching completion, the design team were ready for the next phase of the project. One very useful tool in the studio was the computer-aided design system. Although not essential, CAD is a tremendous time saver. Plans that would normally exist as separate sheets of paper are linked in its memory, so corrections or amendments to one plan will automatically update the others. Complex calculations become easy, for although the main auditorium has many changes of level and innumerable nooks and crannies, the computer can automatically calculate, for example, how much carpet is needed for the floors, or how much paint is needed for the walls. The other fascinating aspect of CAD is its ability to take the measurements of a plan and turn them into a three-dimensional drawing. This means that different design ideas can be tried out and visualized. If they don't work, they can be dropped or enhancements made to their design. 1994 heralded a dramatic change to the site. After 4 months of excavation, Tarmac, the contractors, were able finally to begin laying the foundation slab. Lying so deep in the ground, the slab had to be perfectly waterproof, and so was carefully constructed from alternate layers of rubber waterproofing membranes and steel reinforced concrete.
It's a bituthene, high-tech membrane, rubberoid bituthene, bitumastic membrane, which is intended to prevent the penetration of water into the structure. And then that's sandwiched in another 3 inches of concrete, the 75 mil of concrete, to produce a structural membrane so that water pressure cannot penetrate it. It's held rigid between 2 single reinforced concrete layers. And then on top of that is the main slab.
To make up for lost time, concrete finishing carried on well into the night. Rapid progress continued, and by the beginning of March 1994, the steel erectors began to assemble the huge Meccano set that would make up the skeleton of the hall. The total weight of the steel was 140 tons, and special cranes were brought in to lift each girder into place. A real labour of love was taking place where the Assembly Hall grounds had been reshaped with the excavated spoil. In the teeth of gale-force winds and frequent squally showers, volunteers were busy clearing the ground of stones ready for grass seeding.
It's got to be done, someone has to do it.
My brother said in the prayer this morning it was a privilege to be here, really. And there's lots of others who enjoy this privilege. So.
Strange, isn't it, that people who volunteer to do a hard and dirty job should view it as a privilege? And yet it's a view frequently expressed here.
I think it's a real privilege, because like you say, not everybody can be involved.
I think it's a tremendous privilege it is to be involved in a project of this nature.
Being associated with the project early on has been a real privilege.
It's just a great atmosphere, I love it. Brilliant.
As the spring of 1994 progressed into summer, more witness volunteers were invited to work on the site. Applications flooding in were coordinated on a computerized database. As skills were needed, they could be accessed and the volunteers contacted. By the autumn of 1994, the family of workers frequently swelled to almost 100, with short-term volunteers bringing their specialist skills. One of the donated classrooms was converted into a dormitory to house them and was completely equipped with furnishings freely donated by local witnesses. So not only time and money, but furniture, building materials and even office equipment was freely given by the local brothers and sisters.
We have seen Jehovah's hand in the most remarkable way in our daily lives, in our interface with the contractors particularly, in the way that brothers have just turned up at the right time with the right skills and the right attitude to be able to do what we asked. How materials, computers, equipment of all sorts have come through the front gate on the very day that we needed it. Absolutely miraculous almost.
This spirit of generosity extended to the dining room, fully staffed by volunteers. Every day's food bill is met largely by contributions of food, produce or cash from individuals and congregations across the project area. In fact, this whole project is funded and supported by voluntary donations.
And that started right back in March the 4th, 1986, when we had the mandate from the elders to design and build an assembly hall. And since that time, our brothers and sisters have been very generous, along with the congregations as well, and the circuits, that have contributed so much money that we're able to, and loans as well, and we're able to use that money to generate interest, and also to have tax refunds, over £700,000, two together. And we're now in the position with this project, which is nearly £3 million, including the buying of the land and all the costs we entailed in the early days, that we only need at the present moment, we believe, about £960,000. So we still hope our brothers will still be as generous as ever, because their contributions are going to make this hall a success.
18 months then into the construction phase of the project, are the words of Zechariah chapter 4 still true? Not by military might, not by power, but by my spirit, Jehovah of armies has said. Well, all of us on the project, whether we be construction workers, committee members, or one of the many, many volunteers who have had a share in the support services, we believe that we truthfully can say those words are true. Can I be the voice to say a huge thank you to everyone that has had a share in producing what we have already seen? How much we have appreciated the considerable skills of the brothers and the sisters, the labours of love, the generous financial support, and above all, your prayers. The committee remain confident that Jehovah's same spirit will continue to encourage a generous heart in the brothers, so that the need for a commercial loan will be kept to a minimum. As was true of Nehemiah in his efforts to rebuild the walls of ancient Jerusalem, Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 18 records how the hand of God was upon them to accomplish the work. We feel that way about the Bristol Assembly Hall.